Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Well, I thought I would run through a processing session I did on my latest target, which is M16 or the Eagle Nebula, and it's a bit of a shorter sort of integration, I guess, compared to what I've been doing recently. Had a couple of long projects, one that OIII and I did, that's OIII from OIII's Astro, and we did RCW85 or the Devil's Tower Nebula. And then I also just completed on Centaurus A Galaxy a total of, I think it was 55 hours using the two telescopes to primarily try and identify some filaments from the black hole, and I hope to have a video out on that shortly. But this was, as I said, a shorter project. It's funny, I think it was 10 hours, 15 minutes or something like that in total. Let me just have a look over here. Yeah, 10 hours, 15 minutes. Not long ago that was a long project. Now it seems to be a short project. But I wanted to have a break from the longer 20 to 50 hour projects I've been doing recently. So this one actually collected, I think it was just under 5 hours of HA, roughly 2.5 hours of OIII, and just under 3 hours of S2, so giving me the 10 hours and 15 minutes. Now I was using the Skywatcher Esprit 120 and the ASI 6200 and the Antlis filters, which I purchased not so long ago, and they're the 3nm ones. So this was the HA. I was actually quite pleased with the amount of signal that was coming up in this, and given it was only 5 hours, or just under 5 hours, the signal seemed pretty clean. Not a lot of noise in here, and I didn't do any noise reduction, I don't think, on the HA. I'll see when I go through the processing, or if I did, it was a very tiny amount. Now this was 5-minute exposures, so one may consider that to be a little bit too much, considering the center here is quite bright, but I could deal with that in processing, and I'll sort of show you what I did as I progress along. This was the OIII, a little bit noisier, and again fairly bright in the center here. So, you know, trying to see the pillars of creation, the detail is a little bit lost, but, you know, as I said, there's some techniques to try and bring that out a bit better. And then this was the S2, which interestingly has much better definition of the pillars of creation compared to the other two, probably partly because it's not so washed out in the center. So yeah, that was the 3 monoband imaging filters that I did, and I don't know, I think that was just a little tiny bit of noise exterminator just to sort of soften things up a bit. So if I just, the S2 often has a lot of noise, so I'll just move back and you can see the difference it's made there without sort of really distorting anything else, keeping the detail pretty nicely. So it does a good job. And this was using the linear box ticked. So that's what I did. And then I tried using either just, you can do the screen transfer function to stretch each of those, or use, which I have done a few times recently, the Easy Processing Suite, where the Easy Soft Stretch. The only thing I found was that wasn't really working very well when it came to then combining them into an RGB. I just wasn't getting the right colors, etc. So I actually just stretched them manually using the histogram, just using this, and just sort of watching them and getting them to a point that I liked, and then sort of trying to match up their curves here, as you can see, trying to match them up as best as I can between the three different filters. So that was the HA. This was the OIII. This was the problem, is that I was finding that when I was using the Easy Sweet Soft Stretch, or even just using the screen transfer function, the background was getting quite bright compared to this area, and also when it came to the background of the other images, so I was getting a lot of blue cast through the image. And then this was the S2 again, and so I tried to get them sort of reasonably similar. And then it was a matter of just doing the RGB combination, which was here. And this is what I came up with using an SHO palette, and which gave you the usual sort of slightly yellowy look here. And I'm not sure if at this point this may have been, I'm not sure where we are at this stage, whether I did a little bit of SNRD green. Oh, that's right. I did do these. There are a little bit of purpley in the stars, a little bit of magenta. So I did the correct magenta stars under utilities, that one there. The same effect can be done by just inverting the image. So image invert, and then any magenta stars will look green, and then you use the SCNR tool to remove the green, and that will get rid of the magenta stars. And then it was a matter of removing the stars so that I could then sort of process the nebula without having to worry about the stars getting in the way. And so for this one I actually used StarNet 2. I did both of them. They actually did a very similar result. And I think as I've mentioned in another video previously, that I prefer to remove the stars once it's stretched, because I do find there's a bit of artifact and a bit of blotchiness going on if you do them in the linear state. I just don't find either of them work fantastically in the linear state, so I prefer to do it once they're stretched. And I just did StarNet here. As I said, not much difference, largely because there's no bright stars in here that StarNet tends to struggle with compared to Star Exterminator. So I think in the end I did both of them, and I just happened to progress forward with the StarNet 2 version. So that's it there, and as you can see, it's done a great job. No funny big stars left behind or anything, and you know, it's really hard to see where the stars actually were. So it does do a great job. It just struggles with brighter stars and brighter areas of nebulosity sometimes. So the next thing was to try and work with curves and to improve the color in this. I think with the first one, that was just a change of image identifier to remind myself this was the StarNet 2 version. Then I did curves, and actually if I just come back here, I actually did a series of range masks. So the first one I did was this one here, and that there, as you can see if I move forward into this here, I did first of all a protection of this area, and I worked on a bit of color here, and I actually sort of just increased the saturation a bit here. I didn't want to get too carried away with in this area here where the blue was, because it was sort of starting to intensify a little bit too early. So I really just wanted to deal with this bit first. So yeah, applied the mask there, and you can see that it's just got a little bit richer in color. And then just again increase the saturation around here a bit, and I think sort of, yeah, there again with some of the brightness as well. And then it was a matter of switching the mask over so that now I could just work with this area. Now, as I said, if I just hit show mask, you can see it's quite bright, and I was concerned I was losing the bit of the detail in there. So I just used the same range mask this time to make this area that I can work on and not work on around the outside here. And all I did really here was just sort of darken a little bit, which you can see here, just gently brought down the brightness in this area. And then I think on this one I went through a series of range masks. So I started with this one, and then I moved on to one which was a bit smaller, and I just gradually brought the central areas down in brightness here. I think this one was the third one where I was dealing mostly with the area sort of around the pillars of creation. And then there was a third one with a little bit of sort of more subtle change around the pillars of creation as well there, as you can see. So as I go through here, just reducing the brightness a little bit in this area. You can see it starts to get a bit darker, and as that was occurring, it was increasing the blue in this area. I can't remember whether I was increasing the saturation. Some of this was intensifying as I made it a bit darker, but I think I might have been boosting the saturation a little bit in this area, again because I was restricting the area that was affected around here. Same thing again, just to bring that area a little bit more in line with the brightness all over, and not to lose that definition of the pillars of creation. And just one more, excuse me, one more little change there. And you can see the detail there in the pillars is not too bad. Considering this is an 840mm focal length, it's done a nice job, I think. So I think that was the last. If we just have a look here, show mask, yeah, oh that's right. So then it will come back here. So that was that little mask there that I did. Then the next thing I did was I then, show mask, we'll just remove that one. I then did a couple of color masks. So I did a yellow, which was like this. I didn't actually do a blue because I felt that there was enough blue in here already, so I didn't worry about a blue color mask. So this was the yellow color mask, and I did a green one because the major colors in here were sort of the yellow and the green, and they're very similar, but actually if you notice here that the green is a little less, the darker area in the center is a little bit smaller. So what I decided was if I could just sort of tweak that sort of area between the yellow and the green, just to give a little bit more gradation of color. And what I ended up doing was I just took the green mask in pixel math, and I did green mask minus yellow mask effectively, so green minus yellow, and it gave me this mask here, which I then could apply to the image. So if we go here, mask, show mask, and it's probably easier if I invert it, you'll see it's just lightly round here where I could just play with the colors a little bit, as I said, just to give that little bit of more sort of tonal color variation. Then the next thing was to then apply, I think this one might have been the let's see, invert mask. I think this one might have been the green one. Let me just have a look. No, I think it was yellow. Here we go. So I'll just double check. I think that was the yellow mask there. And again, just played with curves to change the colors just to the, what I wanted. I just do show mask there. And you can see there's just sort of changes in this area here just to make it a little bit richer and warmer, slightly a little bit more red, and to that point there. And so it was actually changing those colors was a combination of using the green and the yellow mask to this point here. What was the last step there? I did a little bit of noise exterminator. Now the reason being is that it actually doesn't look too bad when you look here, but when you move in you can see there is a bit of color noise in here, and it'd be nice to sort of smooth that all out before you apply a luminance to it. So I did just a little bit of noise exterminator here, and you can see it's really smoothed out all that color noise, but it hasn't disturbed the clarity too much, which is quite nice. And you could look at that and say, well, that's not too bad for sharpness. Why not just sort of and detail, why not throw the stars in there? But I decided to go ahead and work on a luminance layer. Now if I just come to this point here, so we stopped there, and then I went to the HA, which I used as my luminance layer since it had most of the detail in here. So the first thing to do was Starnet 2 again to remove the stars, and again, great job. And again, this area is very bright, and so if I applied that to the RGB, I would lose all that color definition in the sort of darker and more detailed area that I worked on. So I did what I usually do. I did a little bit of noise exterminator. Now just a very small amount. The noise here is pretty minimal, but I knew I was going to be applying a couple of other tools, the HDR multi-scale transform tool and the local histogram equalization, and they can increase the noise a little bit. So you can see there, it's just very subtle. I think I had it set on like 25% or 30%, something quite small, so that I didn't overdo it, because you don't want to blur it too much, otherwise you're going to lose that definition. And then the next thing was to apply the HDR multiscale transform, which you can see here, just suddenly then brings that area with a lot more detail, darkens it up a bit, so and sort of evens out the lightness in this area. So it does a great job. I think I might have. Now then I did some local equalization, local histogram equalization. Usually my settings. So let's have a look here. I've usually put this at about 184. Now the amount you want to bring right down, and I usually sit around 150 to 200, because you want just sort of a bit more of a subtle change. You don't want to overdo it. So I applied that here, and you can see how it sort of suddenly made a lot more variation. It's sort of almost like gradations of grey and dark in there to give it a lot more detail. So just step back from here and bring it forward. And I think I actually applied it one more time. Now you could say that was too much. I decided to run with it because I kind of quite liked how this area where it was, there's a lot of dark areas in here, and I just sort of quite like the way it really provided almost a bit more like backlighting, if you like, to give it a little bit more definition to some of these darker streaks. So I ran with it, applied twice. I don't normally do that. I normally do it once and then move on, but I gave it a go twice and thought, why not? And then lastly, then I did a little bit of multi-scale linear transform for sharpness. And again, you got to be careful with this because you can really make it look a bit nasty. So here, if we just move into the pillars of creation, now if I just come down to the, where are we? Here we multi-scale linear transform tool. So these settings, you don't want to leave this at 0.1. I would normally reduce that down to, and I did in this particular instance, 0.05, and the number 3 down to 0.05 as well. And you can vary that between 0.05 or 0.075, but I wouldn't recommend putting it on 1. It can really overdo things a bit. And if you just see here, if I just go forward, it just sharpened up the detail a bit more. Then it was a matter of applying this luminance to this image here, which, as I said, didn't look too bad as it was, with the LRGB combination tool. And if we just zip forward, that was it there. Nothing too dramatic. I didn't actually apply 100% of the luminance. So when you're in the LRGB combination tool, there's also things you can play around with. And one of them here is your channel weights, and another one here is your lightness and saturation areas. You can play around with these sliders to get the kind of result that you want, because sometimes you'll apply your luminance, it'll be a bit more washed out, so you want to reduce the lightness a little bit, or increase the saturation. But the other thing that I sometimes do when I'm putting in the luminance, if it's really too strong, you can just pull down on the channel weight here. And I think in this one I can't remember, I think it was about 80 or possibly 70% that I applied the luminance to, because when I put the whole lot there it was a little bit too much. So yeah, that was pretty close to the final image. I thought it would look quite good like that, and then it was a matter of putting in the stars. So with the stars here, just come back here a bit, these were the stars the way they were. I just did curves by just pulling back on the on the RGB here, just pulled the setting here and just pulled that back a little bit, just to sort of darken things a little bit, make it not so bright. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that when you do remove the stars, you'll tend to find that the stars in the area, let me just remove this, the stars in the area where the nebula was brightest will tend to look a little bit washed out. And when you put them back, All the ones around the outside will have their nice brightness and sort of look like nice round stars, but the ones in here will tend to look a little bit dull and flat looking. So I've taken to putting the stars back in using Photoshop. Okay, so if we just go into Photoshop, and here I've got the a starless version, and then in here I have the stars, and then it's basically a matter of, you can do a few more adjustments to this if you like to reduce the brightness of the stars. What I tend to do is increase the brightness in this area so they match the stars around the outside. So it'll be a duplicate layer, and then I use a mask, go into the mask, clear it here, and then just in the area where they look the dullest, just sort of do a bit of a rough mask like that, feather it out a bit. Like so, and you can adjust it even after you've done the increase in the brightness. Then go up to the camera raw filter, but you could do it through just directly through the curves, and that's something I often do. I forget and tick the wrong thing, goes into the mask. And if we just have a look here, I then just go to the curves and drag this up a bit to brighten these stars. And you can see these are all brightening up and sort of ugly, but you don't have to worry because your mask is such that you're only affecting the stars in the center here. If I just click OK, you'll see suddenly these have brightened up a bit. And then it means that when you actually put them, we'll take this and we will copy this, and Control C to copy it. And if we go to this area, so we're going to duplicate the layer, and then we're going to go up here and do layer, new, and new layer. And then into that, Control V will paste in the stars. And then it's a matter of changing this setting here. Now, the color dodge often does a great job. They're quite bright here, largely because I haven't played around with reducing the stars a bit further, which I would. But you've got other options here. You could even go, if you really wanted to bring them down a little bit further, you can go to screen. If I just zoom in here a bit, let's zoom in to where these stars are. So lighten it, takes them away too much in their little sort of hard little edged flat lights. Screen is not bad. It's similar to linear dodge. Color dodge, again, I don't like. It's just very bright, sort of flat looking stars. Linear dodge works quite well, but it can be quite bright, and light and color is not very good. So I tend to use either screen or linear dodge depending on how the how things are looking. But as you can see there, the stars are popped in, and they still look. They've got their brightness without being overly bright and large, but they have that sort of slight fade off to the edges, so they look more round rather than like a big flat thing. So it's through Photoshop that I've been actually putting the stars back in. And in the end, if I just remove that and that, this was the final version that I came up with. I did a few more tweaks in Photoshop, just played around a little bit with the colors, and I did de-green things a little bit because there was just a little bit too much green in here, I thought. But I did want to get that sort of tonal change. I didn't want this whole thing to be blue. It does have a bit of a change through there, and there's still some nice definition in there. So that was my final image. Again, some may say it's a bit harsh. They like something a bit lighter, and perhaps not quite so defined. I decided to settle on this with this particular image, but that's just a run through of roughly how I process this, and any of those steps along the way you can vary to get a much softer image if you like, or not so much of a difference in colors. But yeah, general run through. So I hope that's been useful, and if it has been, and you enjoy the video, maybe give it a like, and consider subscribing to the channel, because I'm trying to do videos on a fairly regular basis, and I've got a few projects that I've done and I've processed, and I'm going to run through, and there'll be future projects as well. So yeah, I'll leave you with the final image and clear skies.